Hello and welcome to the How to Travel Vegan podcast. I'm your host, Tom Simak, and today we're interviewing Callee Ackland. So before I get into the midst of today's episode, I quickly wanted to touch on this show and how it's going to go forward with the current COVID-19 situation. I haven't posted an episode in about 2 weeks because I've had to make this tough decision of actually temporarily suspending all destination reviews. And this is solely and unfortunately because I don't know what businesses are going to come out on top. As soon as all this blows over, I will get back to reviewing all the destination cities, countries, towns, so that we can make ethical, sustainable choices when traveling. Until then, every 2 weeks, I'll be posting an interview with a vegan business owner or anything vegan and travel related, really. And that is a decision that will be temporary, but hopefully you still get your dose of vegan and travel related content. But with that being said, let's get into today's episode. We are interviewing Callee Ackland today, and she has an amazing story and background, but we're not going to jump into her background too much because we really want to take advantage of the fact that she knows so much about zero waste and in fact runs the only zero waste store in South Dakota. And we're going to jump into a lot of different topics intimately around what we can do as individuals, consumers, and also businesses if you are in that position to make that business decision to make a more ethical cash flow, but also what we can do, you and I, to have a more ethical and sustainable lifestyle. Sustainable being the key term there. We're also going to look at what we can do as a society, whether it's consumer or individual or business, to be a more forward-thinking system and community to make sure that we can strive for a zero-waste system and business model through all levels and walks of life. Callee, thank you so much for coming on the show and being on the How to Travel Vegan podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. How are you doing this evening for you?
I'm good, Tom. Thank you so much for having me. You're in Australia, correct? So it's morning for
Yeah,
you.
just got up. So it's what you have to do with time differences. You have to get up out of bed and is what it is. That's okay. I want to get your story is really cool from US Navy being a translator, and you've got a zero waste shop, and there's heaps that I want to dive into today. But just to start us off a little bit, I want to talk about your vegan journey and even your zero waste journey. Just a quick 2-3 minutes on what got you to where you are now. Like, what are the decisions you've made? What's the education that you gave yourself?
Yeah, for me, it really started from watching a documentary that I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with called What the Health.
Yeah.
And that just introduced so much knowledge to me that, I didn't know that I was missing out on. And just kind of spiraled down a Google rabbit hole of information after that. And, I decided July of 2017 for my 24th birthday. I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this vegan thing. And, I had been a vegetarian for a few years in high school. When I first really became conscious of what meat was and how it was coming to me. But that had lapsed, and then I'd been dairy free for a long time for the health benefits and the benefits to my skin as well. But it was July 2017 that I really wanted to get serious about being plant-based and doing that for the health benefits and the ethical benefits first and foremost. And then from there, I watched a documentary called A Plastic Ocean, just because
Yes.
I'm a documentary nerd, and that's something I enjoy doing in my free time. And that introduced me to the Great Pacific Ocean Garbage Patch, which, for anybody who doesn't know, it is this swirling patch of garbage in the Pacific Ocean. It's caught between currents. It's 3 times the size of Texas, which means it's huge. And that is actually still only the tiniest bit of the trash that's in our ocean. There's still so much of it that is, it's on the ocean floor, it's in the marine animals, it's in the animals that so many populations rely on as their food source. And then, microplastics are in our other food sources, they're in our water. and so I started learning all of this, and I was just blown away, and that's what led me onto a vegan and zero waste journey ever since.
Oh, 100%. I just watched The Plastic Ocean, I think like maybe 3 weeks ago. And just for everyone, it's super accessible to watch. It's on Netflix. So everyone has a bloody Netflix account. And it's really interesting how they don't just show the plastic that's floating, but they emphasize a lot on the microplastics that actually, when they catch fish or they see fish that are floating, they're just dead, and they go to the Philippines, and it's just inside everything. So I urge everyone to watch that ASAP. But on the note of docos, what's your favorite doco you've ever watched?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, the first two that are coming to mind are those two because they were such a pivotal turning point for my life. Um, I think one that I was just watching very recently was Newtown, which was about the school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and that was just an incredibly emotional documentary. And such an important issue, especially here in the U.S., gun rights, and then on top of that, this is totally off topic as well from veganism, but I
That's
was just
okay.
reading about how this last month, March, was the first month in years that there hadn't been a school shooting here in the U.S., but that's only because schools are closed right now.
That's
And then
crazy.
on the other hand, it was also the second highest month for gun sales in recorded history. So totally a different topic that could be covered in an entirely different podcast. But one of the reasons that I just love documentaries is because they teach you so much, and yeah, definitely always something new to learn.
Yeah, I find the whole gun topic so interesting, but like the bad thing about it is I'm nowhere near educated to even speak about it because Australians don't know anything about guns. We just don't. We don't
Yeah.
get it. But yeah, docos are just overall really amazing. But to switch it up a little bit, I do want to talk about zero waste, 'cause since that's your expertise, that's your little
Yeah.
cherry on top, and it's something I love to dive really deep on because there's so much innovation and technology that's happening every single day that helps us become a more zero waste and ethical society. So just to start us off with a nice base, what's your definition of what zero waste actually is?
Zero waste is totally misleading. So I think with the term zero waste, which unfortunately has caught on as the term, but it confuses and it overwhelms a lot of people. And that's something that I really don't like about it. But like I just said, it's what's caught on. I think a far better, more accessible term would be a low impact lifestyle. Because zero waste was originally an industrial term coined in the 1980s, and the principle behind it was being conscious in the design and manufacturing process of the waste cycle. And pretty much everything, because we live in a linear economy and not a circular economy, everything is designed with the landfill as the end result. We might maybe recycle some things once or twice, but in the end of that life cycle of that product, it's still going to end up in a landfill. Um, and so, there's also uh, the accompanying um, lifestyle or movement is the circular economy movement, because they really do go hand in hand. It's all about rethinking our consumption habits, rethinking our mindsets overall, too, not just how we are consuming consumables. But how we are consuming natural resources, and uh, how our consumption habits are affecting humans as well. And then, of course, on the topic of veganism, how it's affecting wildlife and farmed animals, and even our partner companion animals too.
So that being said, why do you think we as individuals should endeavor to be minimal impact? Like you said, what's the first step someone can take to even adopt that as a part of their lifestyle?
So I want to specify first that I think Absolutely 100%. Individual actions matter, and we should be conscious of what we are doing in our daily lives, what we're consuming and not consuming. But I also think it's very, very important to say upfront that this responsibility should not solely fall on the shoulders of the individual consumer, that this is a responsibility of the manufacturers. But of course, most of us are just individuals and we're not making decisions for these manufacturing and large corporations and industries. So I say that up front because I don't want people to feel like overwhelmed, because I see that happen so often. But I think a good place for an individual to start is like with a trash audit, which I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I really do recommend that people try saving their trash for a week, because for so many of us, trash is out of sight, out of mind. And before we can start even reducing our waste or changing our consumption habits, we have to be aware of what those habits are. We have to be aware of what we're throwing away. And so the best way to do that is to collect it and to see. Um, so save it, spread it out on a tarp or a big garbage bag or something like that, and sort through it. See what single use items you're using. Consider first and foremost, what you can just stop buying, what you could maybe make yourself, what you could purchase a reusable alternative for, instead of paper towels, for instance, just using cloth towels, cloth rags that you probably already have in a drawer somewhere in your kitchen.
Mm.
Um, Instead of a straw, well, first and foremost with a straw, because that's always the big thing. That's the gateway
But
drug,
it's
as I
also
like to
the
call it.
easiest like thing to switch. So
Yes, absolutely. And I think when we talk about straws, because I don't know why they ended up being talked about the most, but there's this push of like, oh, switch to a reusable straw. But really, first you should be asking yourself, do I need a straw? If you do not need a straw, then don't buy a reusable one. That's just more resources. Um, so it's not just replacing our consumption habits, it's rethinking them entirely.
wow. There you go. And you did mention that a lot of it does also fall on manufacturers and businesses, and I want to get into that a little bit later. But in the mind of, say, politics or legislation, since you're pretty well thought out, if like here's a good what if situation, and I think there is a lot of power in people, and I think we do really run the governing system of well governments, whether whatever party that may be, because they do listen to people. What's something that you'd like to see in the near or immediate potential later in future that is a legislation that should pass that you think should be compulsory for everyone to help us make that step forward to becoming minimal waste or less consumer based?
That is a really great question. Um, the first thing that comes to mind would be a carbon tax. And in an ideal world, a carbon tax would be on the industries that are causing the most global warming, the most carbon emissions, the most pollution. And ideally, that carbon tax would be straight out of their pockets, because when you look at the people who are leading those corporations, they're billionaires. They
Yeah,
have enough money for it to cut in, to come from their pockets, but they don't want it to. I mean, they got to become billionaires
yeah,
from their money mindset. So unfortunately, when we talk about carbon taxes in particular, which is one of the highest impact pieces of legislation that would combat the climate crisis, unfortunately, in the world that we live in, if a carbon tax were to be implemented, a lot of that would be passed along to individuals and families, which is not fair, because it's not the individual's fault that the world has been as damaged as it is. It is those corporations. Um, and so I think, if we really wanted to get serious about government regulation and legislation, it would fall on the governments would really have to step up and force these most polluting industries to not just one, reduce, if not eliminate, future pollutants, but to do something about everything that they've already caused. Um, I would say I'm a pessimist of sort. I like to call myself a realist, but I probably fall under pessimist.
all pessimists
Um,
call themselves a realist, let's be honest.
yeah, yes, it's very true. I don't see that happening though, because these industries are where they are because they have amazing lobby branches, and they are paying a lot of the politicians who are making the decisions to not give them strong enough regulations. So I think to truly implement any type of government regulation or legislation that would make a serious difference would first require a complete overhaul or perhaps even revolution of our political system to begin with.
That sounds very difficult. Or like, I don't know, I'm just speculating because I don't know much about the topic. We could really take it the other way and just give so much benefit to the businesses and the corporations that are doing ethical, having ethical business practices and making that more profitable. So that's another route we could go down. But in terms of, let's get really specific about, I guess, local town, local community stores and businesses, since you run a really amazing zero waste with the connotations there store in South Dakota, because it's minimal, the term you gave it before. What's, because that's very boutique part of society and it's a hard thing to come by. What's the hardest thing about running a business that's so ethical, I guess?
I think the hardest thing about running this type of business is the educational component behind it. Explaining to people what we're doing and why we're doing it and why it's important and why they should care as well. We are located in a relatively rural and quite conservative area. And so oftentimes, we might face opposition from people who still don't understand science and recognize climate change is happening.
You're talking about
And
boomers, obviously.
usually, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, in some situations, there is no open dialogue, unfortunately, because there's some people that you just can't change their mind and their lifelong beliefs. But we have such an amazing community here, and so many young people or younger people who are passionate and want to know. They want to do more, and I think people want to contribute significantly, but it's hard to know where to start. And so that's something that we to try to help fulfill in our community, is giving that guidance and that starting point of opportunities to get involved, or just the resources that you need to have that educational background to talk about it with other people, to do more research and to do your own thing within this realm.
How do you as a business educate other people in the community? Because you mentioned you do that a lot. What form does that take?
Quite a few different forms. I think it's incredibly important to try to meet people where they're at,
Yeah.
and try to be as accessible and approachable as possible. We normally, of course, things are quite different for us and for everybody right now during the COVID crisis. But we normally host a lot of community events. We do pay what you can workshops. I go and I teach sustainability workshops all over the country as well. Um, we work with other local organizations. We're very active on social media. That's been a great place to use as a free educational platform. And then I also have a podcast too, and that's the Hippie Haven podcast. And so, through that, we're able to reach people all over the world and not be limited geographically.
Of course. And do you think, because you've got that really nice niche of zero waste, so you're really comfortable talking about that. How can a business that's like, say, a cafe, do you think there's also ways for them to promote zero waste? And how can they do that? Because there's a lot of people that I know it is so common to have a job as a barista or as a chef in a cafe. How can you then, in a small business, implement changes that educate ethical, sustainable business practice models?
Yeah, we just partnered with a local cafe to implement a straw recycling program at their location, and they're the first in the entire region to do so. So I think it's about pulling back and looking at your big picture first, and what are your goals within whatever company, and also what impact can you have, whether you're a lower level employee or you are one of the decision makers for the company. I think especially if you are at that lower level, maybe not even involved in management, you're going to have to start small. People don't want
Yeah.
to completely overhaul systems overnight. Unfortunately, the phrase "that's how we've always done it" is very common and maybe not the best way to think. Um, but look at the big picture and look at the big opportunities and the big goals that you want to put into place, and then to tone down from there, and think about the smaller things, like for example the cafe that we recently partnered with. Straws are a pretty small, insignificant thing when you look at our entire system of trash production. But that store or that cafe, if they can recycle 2,000 straws a year, that does add up, and that really means something. And not only that, but it starts a conversation and it gets people thinking. So when they see that there's a straw recycling program at that one place, they're going to start to think about, why isn't there a straw recycling program at other places? Or do I even need this straw? Oh, you know what? I already have a reusable straw, but I always forget to bring it with me. Let me make sure that I'm actually like grabbing it with my keys and my wallet. And this is just one very small example, but I think even just being able to hang up informational posters can really make a difference, because again, it just gets people thinking and it gets conversations started. And so if that's the extent of what you're able to change at your workplace, I think that's a great thing to do, because you have no idea what the ripple effect will be from there, but there will be a ripple effect.
True. As you were talking, I kind of got like, there's a place in Koh Samui in Thailand. I think it's called Jade Chamahat or something, and their ethical practice or their way of being sustainable is so unique. So it's an all you can eat buffet, and you pay 120 baht, which is like $2. So
Wow.
cheap. And what they do to tackle food wastage in their cafe is they say, if you do not finish your food, pay 120 baht fine. So you have to pay the same amount to not eat your food as to eat your food. And I don't see that brought into Australia or the US or anywhere, but I think the point is to get really creative,
Yeah.
because obviously that's an issue that they had to tackle. And obviously being in like a developing country like Thailand, they're like, we can't waste food. Like, this is so valuable for us.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's about being creative. And then other places might look at that, especially because there's like hundreds of thousands of restaurants across Vietnam, Thailand, that could implement the same thing. So that's really cool. And when it comes to businesses with, say, straws, or I think a big thing that I was talking to with Carlos Cirillo, the other podcast, because he used to work in manufacturing and cafes and coffee cups. And a lot of the conversation was the difference between a normal coffee cup that is just waste and the top of the range compostable lid cup, everything is like 4 cents per cup, or five Australian dollars. So that's like 1, 2 US cents. Do
Hmm.
you think as a business, do you think that's something that you should be held responsible with, something like a carbon tax? Or where do you draw the line with what a business should do? What are the struggles with having every business just have ethical coffee cups, or things like that?
Yeah, I think if a company is, if it is the manufacturing company, they are putting this product out into the world. I think the responsibility falls on them to, um, to be responsible for the entire life cycle of that product. And I know that can be definitely considered a pretty radical concept. But
What does that
to me,
mean? Like, for them to be responsible for selling a cheap cup, is that like an extra tax on that cheap cup? Is that what you're trying to say?
that that could definitely be an additional tax. That would probably be one of the most simple ways to go about it. But that could also mean that, we see so many companies that uh, greenwash us essentially and try to pass off like, oh, well, the packaging is recyclable. The problem is so many people around the world do not have access to recycling facilities necessary. So to say like, oh, well, it's recyclable, that's not good enough. And so maybe in those situations, the companies should be encouraged, if not forced, to invest in recycling facilities. Or to change their packaging to something that is very commonly recyclable around the world, or in an ideal system, we really should be trying to reduce single use everything. And pretty much in any industry, the only major exception being the medical and healthcare, because obviously in that case you do need disposable things, but just about everything else, we really should be investing in the infrastructure of reusables and refillables. Instead of grocery stores that are absolutely filled to the brim with all this single use throwaway stuff, why aren't we building more bulk stores, more refillable stores? Why aren't we encouraging people to bring and reuse the same container over and over? Why isn't there the transportation infrastructure to support these like bulk quantities and minimal packaging? I think ideally that's what a manufacturer should be responsible for, as well as looking at the entire end game.
So when you're looking at places for Australia, it's like Coles, Woolies, like your big guns, and for the US, I guess it's Walmart, Costco. When you're walking in there and you're looking at the shelves, do you think everything on there could be free of single-use plastics?
Not every single thing, but I do think that we could easily see an 80 or 90% reduction if we were to truly strive for it. I do understand that there's a lot of situations in which single-use plastics are definitely convenient, but then you also have to question whether or not your temporary convenience is worth the destruction of the planet. And that ties back for a vegan audience, is a temporary good taste worth
Yeah.
the life of an animal and the destruction of the planet? So I think vegans especially can understand that.
I was also going to add, when it comes to manufacturers, but also businesses, let's say us as an individual want to partake in creating an eco-sustainable product. What do you think's so hard or difficult about creating a sustainable product? Is it mainly the manufacturing that's holding you back, or what are some other challenges that you can expect? If I wanted to create uh, eco-sustainable, no plastic toothpaste or something like that, what are some things I have to think about?
Mm, um, I think in the creation of sustainable products, some of the big things that need to be thought about would be your supply chain. Of course, you want to look at how ethical it is. You want to be looking at fair labor practices, fair wages, where it's coming from, the carbon emissions of transportation. Um, you want to try to source as locally as possible, as much as possible. I also think personally that it's incredibly important to be supporting female-owned businesses as much as possible, because female financial freedom is really important and is a huge factor in the high number of domestic violence cases around the world. So supporting female entrepreneurs and helping fund women and giving them financial freedom is important. Um, I think as well, paying attention to the packaging, of course. You want to be aware of the end game. You also want to look at the if it contains ingredients, which pretty much everything does. But I'm talking about like food or consumables. You want to look at how healthy are those. Are they toxic? What kind of runoff is there? What kind of pollutants are there from the factory? And how is that affecting the local communities, the air, the water, the soil, and the surrounding land from where that's being manufactured? If it's colored in any way, what type of coloring is being used. Even if it doesn't have ingredients per se, everything is made up of chemicals. Everything is made up of something. So, you know, um, you're always looking about the chemical leaching and how that's affected in different circumstances. And then as well, you want to be looking at your own labor and your own overhead and your own systems. Um, I think it's important paying attention to like where you're choosing to locate your business, the employees that you're choosing to hire. Um, I think if you are personally responsible for a workforce, you should definitely be get investing in as much as possible. I think it's also important to be helping those with less opportunities, such as people with mental or physical disabilities, people who've previously been incarcerated and don't have very many work opportunities. So a million things, and I could go on and on. Of course, it is impossible to factor in every single thing. It's impossible to achieve every single thing, especially when you're first starting out and you don't have a lot of. But if you have a dream or a vision, it's important to get started, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not 100% the best. You know, if I believe that if you have an idea, that idea was planted in your brain for a reason because you are capable of bringing it to fruition.
That's dope. To anyone who heard all of that. And do you think, because there's a lot of products out there that are eco-friendly, if you were and running a business like that, and maybe also on the perspective of one, because I know your stories, I believe 70% from female business owners, which is awesome, really good work.
American female business owners, yeah.
That's incredible. For them, what do you see is the biggest benefit that they've achieved by creating a product that is has hit all those ethical, sustainable as best as they possibly can? What's the big benefit that someone who's maybe a small business owner like that do you see achieving or having?
I think it's twofold. I think it would be both freedom and fulfillment. And I say fulfillment especially because of our niche and our desire to do the best that we can for the environment. And being able to put out products that meet that we see a need for, and directly fulfilling it personally. I think fulfillment and then freedom, and that goes hand in hand with financial freedom, as I mentioned earlier, and also just freedom from the 9 to 5 corporate job, freedom to make your own decisions, all of those different things that come into play with pretty much any type of entrepreneurship.
Totally. And there's so much benefit in creating an amazing product that you stand by, because then you're not waking up droopy and feeling crap every day of the week, because you're actually proud of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so many people can relate to that. The whole going to work at a job that you just aren't happy at.
yeah, I'm a huge advocate of taking a pay cut to do something you love, and
Yeah.
it's because money isn't the be all end all. It definitely helps because financial independence is very important for everyone to have options, but to stand by something you love is, just like what's that? The Greatest Showman. It's like, have you seen that? And I've seen
That's the
it.
one with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman and
Yeah.
Zac Efron, and this guy is poor, but he does what he loves, and
Yes.
it's cool, cool,
And
cool.
he does it despite the haters and the opposition and everybody who told him that it wasn't possible. Yeah, that's a really
Totally.
motivational movie. I love it.
Not
Plus Zac
vegan at all,
Efron.
but like, oh, Zac Efron, Zendaya, beautiful people, just their
Yes.
eyes. Oh my God. Anyway, um, in terms of like, I want to touch on zero waste a little bit more and being ethical. Is there resources out there? Because I'm not really big into that niche. What is there an online resource that someone can look into to find products that are zero waste? Like, how do you come across information on like that stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty easy with a Google search. There are so many online zero waste stores all over the world, and there's several directories to help you find either online or in-person stores near you. I have one myself for online zero waste stores on my hippiehavenpodcast.com website. There's also zerowastehome.com has a directory of zero waste stores around the country. And for US based, litterlist.com has a directory of zero waste stores and composting options around the US. So there's directories. You can just kind of Google zero waste or refill or bulk near me. Lots and lots of options. Definitely, as we see even more and more stores pop up, you see a lot of greenwashing coming with it, though, and that's something that, as somebody who's been in this field for a few years now, it's very frustrating.
You
I
say
do recommend
greenwashing, brainwashing, greenwashing. What'd you say?
greenwashing. Oh, okay.
Greenwashing. What's that?
Greenwashing is something that pretty much all of us encounter almost every day, and we don't realize it. What greenwashing is when companies um, make themselves seem super eco-friendly because eco-friendly sells. Customers
True.
care. They want things that they know have a minimal impact on the planet. And, we see that with the way that we see so many companies that'll slap a natural, all natural label on it, even though it isn't regulated here in the US. Anybody can put that label on. It doesn't even have to be true. Um,
Really?
you
Shit.
know, yeah. Oh, well, the US regulations are a whole nother mess of a topic. But we also, you'll see bottled water that says gluten free. It's like, it's
What?
water. Of course it's gluten free. Companies are putting these labels on because they know that it helps sell their products. And so when they're doing that with regards to eco-friendly or sustainability in particular, it's called greenwashing. And you see that in examples like you'll see reusable straws or a bamboo toothbrush sold in plastic packaging, or
Oh,
you'll
that
see,
frustrates the hell out of me because we have it
yep,
in Australia, bamboo. It's in a cardboard box, and you're like, "This is phenomenal." And then you open it, and the toothbrush is in plastic, and you're like, "What the hell?"
yeah,
And on the
yeah.
other side, you have like amazing food packaging in the vegan aisle in Coles, and you open like these frozen burgers, and there's no plastic, and it's just phenomenal. And it's so hard to tell sometimes. Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
I know. Cardboard boxes with plastic bags inside are just the bane of my existence. But I think I mentioned earlier, we see a lot of companies that'll, slap the word recyclable on their packaging. But if you can't actually recycle them, if your local town or municipality doesn't actually have the facilities to recycle them and they're still ending up in the landfill, then who gives a damn if there's a label that says recyclable on it? And so that's, I think, one of the most common examples of greenwashing, or companies that are like, oh, we donate 1 billion, or no, excuse me, we donate $1 million to charity every month. But then you look up the company and they make $27 billion in profit every year. And you're like, yeah, $1 million is pocket change to you. That doesn't actually mean that you're a good ethical company. You're just doing this for the public attention, the PR that it gives you. So greenwashing is just unfortunately becoming so much more common every day, it seems. And so for people who are looking up, um, definitely first, if you have a zero waste or any type of eco-friendly store, any type of small business, you should be supporting small businesses in your area first and foremost. But if you don't have something available to you locally to fulfill your needs, and of course something that you do actually need, then go online to buy it. Support an ethical online company, but make sure that they are actually legitimate. Look at their about page. If they're not willing to show you a face or a name, or even like the location that the company is based out of, if they can't even give you a town, they're probably not legit. They're probably somebody who's just online trying to make some money off of what's considered a trend. So that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, it's so much to look into, and I wanna get a bit specific because I love these little questions when it comes to products in our household, because cabinets can fill up so damn quickly. What's your favorite zero waste product that you have, or favorite ethical product that you've purchased in the last year or two that has just changed the way you do things?
Oh, what a good question. Favorite zero waste product. Um, I was doing another interview just a couple hours before this one, and they asked me pretty much the same topic. And just before that, we had been talking about what we're calling the Great American Toilet Paper Shortage of March 2020. I don't know if you heard
It,
about
it,
that down
it's
in
it's
Australia.
global. It's global.
Yeah,
Trust me. There's no toilet paper here, and because
really.
yeah, it blew up before America because a lot of our manufacturing comes from China because we're so close to them.
Yeah.
So our toilet paper ran out in like February, and
Oh
then
wow.
yeah, it ran. And I saw all the TikToks, and then I saw like a few weeks later, America started posting the TikToks. I'm like, oh, it's not Australian. It's freaking global. Can't escape it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had just been talking about, the COVID crisis and toilet paper shortage, and so when I got asked that exact same question a couple hours ago, my answer was, my bidet, because that's
Yeah.
been particularly handy lately with toilet paper completely unavailable. And, bidets have been used, or some form of bidet has been used for hundreds of years in cultures all around the world. They're scientifically proven to be far more sanitary than using toilet paper, and they actually use less water as well than what the toilet paper manufacturing process uses.
Oh,
And so just all around, they're better for you in just about every way, and you don't have to worry when crazy things like this happen and you can't find toilet paper on the shelves. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, which is probably a little strange. Um, the other thing that comes to mind off the top of my head that I think is particularly fitting for your audience too is my nut milk bags. So being able to blend, oats or almonds or sunflower seeds with water in my blender and then strain that with a nut milk bag to make my own plant-based milk. I find that really handy too. And then the pulp, I guess, of like the oats or the almonds or whatever it is that I made milk with is left over in the bag. And you can do so much with that leftover pulp. I can put it in my morning oats, you can freeze it, you can make cookies with it, you can add it in your desserts, that sort of thing. So that's just kind of going back to the zero waste mindset of trying to not throw things away and rethinking how we're using
yeah.
things.
It's really cool. I feel like I really like that because I feel like thousands of years ago, we would not waste anything. Like I
Oh,
know with
absolutely. Yeah.
bananas, I've heard of this and I've yet to try it, but I'm so curious. Banana's probably my favorite food in the whole world. I'll have like 10 for breakfast. I'm good.
Sounds like a vegan.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but with the banana peel, you can actually boil that with hot water and make a tea and get all the nutrients that are on the skin as long as you
Really?
wash it from like the chemicals that could potentially use to grow it. But
Yeah.
always wanted to try it, but I keep thinking like, when you accidentally bite into banana skin and you're like, oh, like when you have to sometimes bite it to open it, it's the worst thing. But
Yeah.
oh God, those food hacks are just so amazing.
Yeah. Well, and supposedly you can also, and I haven't tried this. I'm really curious about your banana peel tea. Let me know how that tastes. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have you
well,
try it before I do. But I've also heard with banana peels in particular that you can rub them on the leaves of your plants, not just to help like dust and shine the leaves of the plant, but it's also adding nutrients directly to the leaves as well that the plant is able to absorb. So haven't tried it yet, but maybe one of your listeners has.
bananas,
And
they're bloody versatile.
oh, definitely. I love making banana ice cream. It's just the best thing in the
Oh,
world.
bananas go in everything, let's be honest. Savory,
Yeah.
sweet, just do it, bananas. And just before we wrap up here, is there any insightful wisdom you'd like to bestow upon us?
I love how you use the word bestow because that's part of my company name. Um, I think that it's so important for people to remember that each and every one of us can make a difference. Um, the world has so many problems, and it can feel so overwhelming for compassionate, caring people to know like where do I start, where do I focus, what do I care about the most. And oftentimes that overwhelm can just burn people out and make them not feel like they can contribute anything. But I don't think that's true at all. I think never doubt that a small, thoughtful group of citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's by Margaret Mead. And that is something that motivates me almost every single day and keeps me going as well, and keeps me dedicated to our mission. Because I think that it is absolutely true, and it might feel hard in the day to day, but over time, the actions that you take and the choices that you make, they really do matter. We see that with veganism. We see that in the fact that every meal that we choose to have a vegan meal is directly saving the lives of an animal or two. And you can turn that over and see that in a way of helping the environment too, with actions that you take regarding your consumption and your trash and the such.
That's really cool, and I'm more impressed that you remember that quote. There was one thing I totally forgot to talk about with you that I just remembered. I'm like, oh, I really want to try this because I think day to day there's so many awkward conversations that we have, not only as vegans but as humans, and when we have an opinion, it gets hard. I wanted to have a conversation with you about how you would converse with someone to introduce them to the idea of ethical purchases and not using straws and potentially taking their own bags to the shops. How do you talk to people when you see someone having a plastic bag, whether it's a friend or a stranger or family? How do you approach them about that? Like, hey, why do you have a bag? Like, hey, do you know you could just get a reusable bag? Like, what do you say to them?
I think it's incredibly important to meet people where they're at. And so first and foremost, we never know what somebody's personal situation is. And certainly if it's our own friend or family member, we have a pretty good inclination of what their life is. Um, but I definitely wouldn't ever want to judge somebody or put them on the spot or make them feel ashamed, because we don't know what situation that exact day is. And I
Mm,
certainly forget to bring my reusable bags sometimes. It's about creating habits. But I think it's important to meet people where they're at. And if we're talking about a larger scale conversation just around ethical habits, whether that's eating less plant, or not eating less plants, eat more plants, eat less animals, or reducing our trash, or switching, um, if you know that person, or if you can ask them and find out what is important to them. For a lot of people, we think with our wallets. We make decisions around the money in our bank account because we have to. So a lot of people are interested in how to save money. And a vast majority of the time, reusable products can save you money. And so coming at it from that approach of, this will help you directly. Um, and for other people are very, very concerned about their health and want to always, I think almost all of us, we want to be healthy, but where do we even start? That's a big hard goal to accomplish, healthy.
yeah.
Um and so we can look at, um talking with veganism, talking about the health benefits of eating more plants and less animals, and the cholesterol that you won't be consuming, and vegans live longer, and all of these different things. And then when it comes to like zero waste and buying more sustainable products, buying natural products, you can talk about, so many chemicals are absorbed through our skin, so we want to be conscious of what type of body and cosmetic products we're using, and if they're natural, and um, even the deodorant that we're using, the toothpaste that we're using. um, and I think finances and health are the two easiest ways to open up conversations with people, and so that's probably a good place to start. But again, just try to meet people where they're at. You're not going to change somebody overnight. I think it's important to remember, though, that you can plant a seed, and you might never ever see the fruit of the tree of that seed, but if you can plant the seed, then you did your part.
Beautiful. And where can we find you?
So, if you want to listen to my podcast, the Hippie Haven podcast, we talk all about living harmoniously with ourselves, with others, and with the planet. That's found on all major podcasting apps, or full show notes and transcript on hippiehavenpodcast.com. And then, if you want zero waste products, you're looking for an online store, you can shop at hippiehavenshop.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as Hippie Haven. And then we will be on YouTube very soon as well,
Ooh,
with,
fancy.
yeah, DIY tutorials, behind the scenes of our production, lots of zero waste tips, and showing what myself and my employees, what our lives look like as people who are striving to be vegan, to be zero waste.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some amazing tips and tricks and insights to what the world of zero waste is like. Because it's a first for the podcast. We don't talk too much about it. Obviously, it's mainly about food, but it's a really important topic that everyone should be thinking about, whether it's their food or whether it's their house, whether it's the way they transact with other businesses and consumers if you are a business. So we really appreciate your time here today, Callie. Really appreciate it. And definitely check out all her stuff. And have an amazing night. And I will have an amazing day because this time zone is cooked. Thank you so much for coming on, Callie.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tom, and thank you to your listeners as well. I know so many of us are vegan for ethical reasons, and I know that that's a direct translation to supporting ethical businesses and supporting the world we want to see. And people are vegan for health benefits, and that relates to the environment. And then there's a lot of people who are vegan for the environment. So I think this topic will be very relevant to all of your listeners in some capacity.
Absolutely. Until next time. See ya. Alrighty, thank you so much for listening all the way through to the end. If you've made it this far, please take a minute out of your day and leave us a 5-star review. You don't have to say anything, you just click the 5 stars. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe for more. It helps out so much since I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. But until next time, much love. Peace.